Or Florida State just can't catch a break. ESPN is backing the ACC in their fight against Florida State. Caleb, explain. What does this mean for the Noles, who may have committed a felony?
Yes. So ESPN submitted a filing in North Carolina court to support the ACC's lawsuit against the Florida State Board of Trustees. Now, remember, guys, Florida State filed a lawsuit against the ACC. The ACC countersued against Florida State. The ACC suit is in North Carolina. Florida State's is in Florida. The reason they're doing that is because they're fighting on where to have it because, if it's in Florida, it'll be friendlier to Florida State. If it's in North Carolina, it'll be friendlier to the ACC. So the ESPN, which is backing the ACC, filed it in North Carolina. They say Florida State, they say the deal contains textbook trade secrets. The ACC's ESPN deal contains textbook trade secrets, and that Florida State publicly disclosing the terms of the media deal is destabilizing and harmful to them. So what they're saying is these are trade secrets, like, for instance, you have to have trade secrets in the stock market and stuff like that. And they're saying by exposing the deal with the ACC and ESPN, Florida State has violated a clause that is that makes it a felony.
Exposing what deal? Just the fact that they were getting
the ESPN ACC TV deal.
Okay,
the ESPN ACC TV deal.
Okay, so why would Florida State have released that and not the ACC?
Because the deal is a really, really horrible deal, and it's one of Florida State's arguments for wanting to get out of the ACC.
Okay.
And why is the worst?
So why is ESPN backing Florida State?
No, they're backing the ACC.
Backing the ACC.
Do you want the real reason, or do you want what they're claiming?
Let me go with what they're claiming, then the real reason.
They're claiming Florida State committed a felony by releasing the terms of their deal with the ACC because it's textbook trade secrets. Okay. Like, you can't just release insider trading information between businesses, obviously.
That doesn't sound... If you signed a non-disclosure, yes, it could be criminal. Okay, so
yeah.
What do you think the real reason is? And before you get to that, I want to remind people that Sports Treasures carries over 5 million sports treasures and so much more. Follow on Facebook for the best sports memorabilia, daily updates. Go to facebook.com and follow them at Sports Treasures TN, Sports Treasures TN. By the way, they'll bring you the prizes for Hooker's Corner that you can join. We'll put a link on the board. We had some people join yesterday, and you can win a mini helmet signed by Hendon Hooker. So go right ahead, Caleb.
Okay, they're backing this because the ACC is stuck in a really crappy deal with ESPN right now that ESPN is the huge beneficiary of. And that deal could fall on its face if Florida State leaves, because here's what's happening. The ACC is stuck in a contract they signed in 2016, and they're stuck in it through 2036. So for ESPN's sake, they want to see the ACC survive. Now, ESPN is going to make out fine either way, because what happens is if Florida State leaves the ACC, and they could actually themselves cancel their contract with the ACC by 2027. But the thing is, when Florida State does inevitably leave the ACC, that's going to knock off the next round of expansion. And they're worried about how much extra they'd have to pay for SEC games in 10 years, or if they want to go get the Big Ten games in 10 years, in 7 years. So, because the more of these power programs you add, the more value there is. So it's much easier for ESPN if the ACC survives and they keep them stuck in this really bad deal through 2036, where ESPN is just raking in money.
Yeah. This is such a long-term contract, and you've knocked the SEC television contract, and it's not great. And Jimmy Himes who will join us tomorrow, has knocked it too. But this contract, just in terms of its length, is a bad contract. Nobody knows, and they didn't at the time. Look what's happened since. You've had NIL, you've had a college football playoff. Why would you sign a contract that long?
Because they were so...
Aside from the money, just the length.
Because, well, when Maryland left the ACC in 2011 and paid like a $50 million exit fee that the Big Ten covered, they were so worried of losing other conferences that they just immediately strong-armed them into this long-term deal and this grant of rights deal. And And so I think that was, so they were doing this to try to make sure they had the schools locked in. And it was more important to keep the big schools like Florida State and Clemson locked in than it was to get a good deal from ESPN.
Let me ask you this. Will there be an ACC in 10 years?
No.
Okay.
No, and here's why there won't. They will what's going to happen is Florida State is still working and Clemson are working behind the scenes. The way they're going to get out of this is they're going to corral a majority of members to leave, or I think they'll win the suit because, I'm talking now out of the side of my mouth though. No, there might be, because Cal, Stanford, and SMU to the ACC makes it very hard to dissolve the ACC because they all have a vote now in whatever Florida State or Clemson decides to do. That's why the ACC did it. And the truth is, we had T. Scott Jones on, and he had a good point. Florida State can't sue the ACC just because you can't sue somebody for forcing you to be stupid. And I mean, and so I don't know what happens with this. I do know this. Florida State fans, listen to me. You're going to like what I have to say. And I'm somebody who didn't say you belonged in the playoff because it's conspiracy Caleb time. ESPN has an incentive to make Florida State a total undesirable on the national market for conferences. Meaning, you will see, and if ESPN has that incentive, the ACC has that incentive, and selection committee has that incentive, meaning you will see them work overtime to try to keep Florida State out of events like the playoff over the next 10 to 12 years, including, they don't even care if they lose money on it. It's so much more devastating if they lose Florida State that they want to take away all of Florida State's leverage, and they do that by devaluing Florida State. I'm just telling you, half the selection committee was made up of ACC administrators this past year. Florida State didn't get in. There's an incentive structure right now to devalue Florida State as much as possible while they're stuck in the ACC.
And then you pick them up for pennies on the dollar. So if you're the SEC, do you pick up Florida State if you can get them for pennies on the dollar in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years?
Yes. Yes, you pick up Florida State. Could you imagine how... And people think I'm crazy because I want the SEC to go to 24 teams. I think they should pick up Florida State and Miami. Just the entire... Then you have the whole Florida footprint right there, honestly. And yeah, you take Florida State. Florida State is such a powerful brand that... Yeah, you take them. Clemson, you and I think both agree. If Clemson starts struggling, they won't have the same. They won't be the revenue generator if they start struggling. But Florida State will always be a revenue generator.
Yeah, and there's something sexy about Florida State, isn't there? With the...
You mean beyond the girls that intrigued Brent Musburger?
No, beyond that, yes. But back in the day, with Dion, and they came kind of out of nowhere, and they weren't even they were a girls' school, and they were about to disband football, and Bobby Bowden was a likable figure. I mean, there's something very likable about Florida State, even though I know you don't like them, but there's something appealing.
No, I don't dislike them. I just thought they got favorable treatment, but that's because Bobby Bowden was smart and he made friends with the media. Guess what? You make friends with the media and the media runs your sport, you're going to get some favorable treatment. Yep. I mean, Florida State, the funny thing is, as you know, Dave, Miami, Florida State, and Florida all became like overnight powerhouses in the 80s and 90s. Big history lesson. Why did that happen? Anybody want to take a guess?
I don't know.
Air conditioning became a normalized part. Central air, finally by the 60s, became part of every household and affordable, which made it easier for a lot of people to move to Florida. Exploded in population. Those kids were in their teens by the 80s and 90s, and that's why they all started going there. It became a much easier place to recruit at. And look, Florida State's a sexy man. More and more people are moving to Florida, so it's still going to stay a sexy brand. And I think that, quite honestly, yeah, you take Florida State, but I don't know how this ends because they're in a really, really, really rough situation right now. And now that ESPN's against them, it could be even rougher.